servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are gonna witness business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve Ramon and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast. Steve Ramon.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. I'm thrilled to have you join us today. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the idea of doing business and living life with a purpose, serving others, and yes, achieving success. We believe when we approach our work and our lives with a servant's heart, we can truly make a difference. Or impact might be another great word. We created this show for you because we want everyone to be motivated, inspired, and educated to make an impact in your world. And this guest is going to do that in spades. So I can't wait for you guys to hear her. So think of you, whether you're an entrepreneur, a community leader, or simply someone looking to bring more purpose into your daily life, this podcast is here to support and uplift you. So when we dive in to this show today, I want you to think about who you're going to serve today and how you're going to create impact. And the key word there is today. We don't want to wait till tomorrow. Let's do it today. Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing sponsor, Pantheon Alliance. Picture yourself joining an elite community of thriving business owners from a variety of industries, all working together to create a powerful referral marketplace. It's an incredible opportunity to expand your network and elevate your business to new heights. So, as I always say in my monologue, servant and impact. Well, both of these fit this guest like crazy. And she does it in a unique way that I want her to explain and talk about so you understand what holistic really means. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's exciting to be here. And I'm just reminded, even hearing you give that little introduction, how important it is to really remind ourselves that we have a choice. Every single day, we have a choice. And when we get up, which choices we are going to make will impact us in that moment, but ripple out to all of the people we interact with on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, and on a lifetime basis. So it's exciting to just even start off on that literal note, because it's so important. It's so important to hear over and over again. I tend to forget it, but it's just such a great reminder. Each day we have a choice.
I love the audience. She coming out with a bang. Look at that. What a great tip to start this show. Absolutely true. We've got to practice this every day, whatever that is, to help you grow. Holistic practitioner, we talked about before the show in the green room. What the heck is it?
What the heck is it? Well, we talk so much about change. Life is change, really. I sort of have moved into this space of I've stopped trying to define what it is outside of me and look at what it means to be in relationship with the fact that I am just constantly fluid. I am changing every day, every moment. Sure, there are things about me that I love really grabbing onto and saying, this is me. But life is all about the way we interact with people. And that means it's all about shift and change. And so if we think about what it means to move through life, we can look at specific moments, or we can look at the entire ecosystem of what it means to engage with the world. And that's a holistic approach. It's blowing it out just enough that we actually have more perspective to look at more than just what's right in front of us. It's almost like taking blinders off and getting our peripheral vision involved so that we can actually pick up what's happening out here in our world, because it affects us in any given moment, but it gives us a deeper connection to all sorts of ways we can stay engaged with what's ahead. And that becomes really exciting for people. So a holistic change practitioner is somebody who really takes the approach of, before we dig in, let's back up. really get a feel for what we're doing, and then we can really see where we want to go based on all of the pieces being thrown into the mix. And that, I feel like, it's just such an exciting way to approach moving forward in business and in life.
With education. And I love the word you use, fluid, because you're right.
Mhm.
It's like water. Our up and downs of our life is very fluid. How much is awareness a big part of this?
I think awareness is the key. I really
Oh,
think that we forget how much just noticing something can change everything. And, sometimes it's as easy as remembering that, we have a world around us, a physical world. I'll give you a really kind of funny example. I get up every morning and I have a fairly similar routine, right? I do the same things every day. And I had lived in my new apartment for almost a year before I saw a book on the bookshelf that I pass every single day, right? Because I would get up, I would do I would just walk straight past it. And one morning I just stopped and I went, "Oh my gosh, that was the book I was just thinking about the other day." And of course, it was The Artist's Way, which is an amazing book and actually helps anyone, humans, dig into their sort of sense of creativity and exploration of the world around them. And it was like all of a sudden a huge piece of what I had been looking for unlocked. And all I had to do was notice that that book that had been sitting on the shelf for almost a year was actually there and available for me to just tap into if I wanted to. So that's just sort of a funny anecdotal
yeah.
story, but it's like we don't realize how in any given moment, maybe just like shifting our attention this much can totally alter the course of our world.
So that reminds me, cars are a perfect example of this. You go buy, I bought a truck 8 years ago, is this unique brown color. And I
Mhm.
bought the truck, going, oh, it's unique. And then I saw four of them that week. It's the same type of
Totally.
thing. It happens. Everybody says, oh, I bought this unique, or I bought this red car. And next thing you know, I see three red cars,
Mhm,
Prius, let's say, or
mhm,
whatever it is. Is that similar
mhm.
to the same type of mindset?
I do think it is, but it's sort of like for me, I view it as what we take for granted. It's sort of like when I'm walking down the street, I'm not thinking about necessarily the expression on my face, how fast I'm walking. I'm just kind of doing what I'm doing, autopilot, right? And that's very, very useful because if we had to think really intensively about every single choice we made, it would be a really, really intense
Tough
world.
life.
Right? Like it
Yeah.
would take us a really long time to do anything. So efficiency is an amazing gift. But what happens if we can just sort of disrupt, interrupt, kind of just ripple through our processes to say, what kind of an expression do I have on my face at this moment? And that can just be as simple as saying, I'm really happy and I've got a big smile on my face. Or we could realize we were really deep in thought and we have a scowl on our face. And that changes the way we then interact with the world. So I think awareness is a really interesting and fun explorative tool because it's something we can tap into at any given moment. There is always something to notice, there's always something going on. And for people that sort of say, "Oh, that feels really overwhelming," all of a sudden I move through the world and there's too much to notice. Start usually by saying, "Just notice what you notice." Do you notice the breeze? Do you notice the temperature? Do you notice how you feel? Do you notice? And all of a sudden, it's like things start enlivening around you. And that's kind of the power of what awareness unlocks. It's not sort of this thing like, okay, check, I did it, I was aware, but it's more like this really neat tool for enlivening and really opening up more potential.
And that's where somebody like you or somebody else that makes you accountable to that, aware of it by talking through it, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely, because we don't know what we don't know, and that's nobody's fault, right? If we've never done something before, we can't possibly know. But in moving toward things that we don't know, there are tools that we can use to make that process just a little less unnerving. And one of them is just to start opening up that field of what it means to be a little bit more aware. Really looking at making eye contact with people in a room when you enter. Right? Whether it's for an interview, whether it's for a meeting, whether it's for, it really, really changes your ability to engage when you just have your receptors open a little bit more.
Yeah. Question I always want to ask when I talk to holistic coaches or advisors, people in the holistic
Mhm.
field, is what's the opposite of holistic?
Mm.
There's yin and yang, there's bad and good. What's the, holistic's good, what's the bad, so people can understand. I think they can understand a little better. And I'm always curious what that other word would be.
Mm. Well, I will answer your question, but before I do, I really try to avoid the judgment term of good and bad because I think there are moments for
Yep.
everything. So I want to
Yep.
be very clear about that, because my answer is hyperfocus, and this is not a bad thing. Sometimes hyperfocus is incredibly useful to us, but chronic hyperfocus that ignores signs, that ignores all of the other pieces, and leaves us so limited. That tends to be what the challenge is. So there's sort of something interesting to say. I don't know that I'd say it's the opposite of holistic, but sort of like you have this really holistic kind of broad, open, available approach, right? Where you're kind of looking at bigger picture systems and
Yeah.
things like that. And then you have this really, really, really hyper focused where you're very narrow minded in terms of what your actual goal is. And again, there are moments for that, but if it's your only mode, then that becomes limiting. And that's what I think is the challenge.
You're a godsend. That's exactly a great answer. No, and for me, some people in the audience, not everybody, I understand. I understand holistic, but now I understand it because, as you know, as a practitioner, you've got to simple it down for people, especially with their own they don't know. They've got to understand it. So you just did that. I think we can end the show right there. Half kidding. I'm joking, audience. But that's a great tip, audience. If you re-listen to that over and over, that's a great tip. Holistic to chronic focus. It's
I'll
great.
give
Not that it's
people
bad.
Yeah, I'll give you another just like really quick
Yeah.
version of that, right? Because I came across some really fascinating research when I was researching for my book, and I came across some research on the learning styles of kids versus when we get older, right? And as kids, we have all of these really open, like curious, open-minded, non-judgmental. There are supports in place. There's no judgment, there's no risk. Well, not that there's no risk attached, but there's just all of this open space. And as we specialize, as we get older, right, our focus narrows. So does our ability to learn, unless we keep some of those really, really important qualities in place. And that is actually a choice. That is a choice, right? If we are going to stay curious or if we're going to say, no, this is my only focus. So that's another interesting way to look at it. And anyone who has children, who has engaged with children, sees this really beautiful, open way that they engage with the world. And I'm certainly not saying we should just forget all of our responsibilities and just,
Yeah.
go around and play all the time, although play would probably help everybody a little bit more. I do think it's important to remember that there is something just absolutely wonderful about that awe and about that way that younger people, kids especially, look at life, because it's not limited. It's not limited by anything. They're just exploring their environment and willing to take that feedback. And so I think there is something to be reminded of. We were all there once. We were all kids
Yeah.
once, right?
Amen.
There's something good to be reminded of there too. So that's another kind of version. If that, hyper focus doesn't appeal to you, is sort of like, think about the difference of approach, of kids versus sometimes adults who get in their very fixed mode.
Yes. I love being a kid when I can. And I want to thank you real quick for correcting the host, me. And I'm very humble about that. You're right. Good and bad can be a good thing. And you're right. It's not opposing energies. Sometimes bad, you need to look at bad. So, audience, I want you to hear that, because that was very smart of her to bring that up. And I'm love to be corrected, because I learned that way. And it's such a great way. I want to
Mm.
learn something else. I'm going to segue. You graduated with a music degree and you're into holistic change practitioner. What the heck happened?
Well, I think if you interviewed a number of people who got degrees in music, you would find that there are a significant number of them who are no longer using that piece of paper that says they are actually certified to be a musician. No, it has been quite a fascinating journey. And, it's funny looking back, singing was just what I did. I found it at a very young age. I think I was 8 years old when I joined a children's choir, and it just really became my thing. I loved doing it. There was so much passion space. I got to dig into an area of life that I just had never explored, languages and sound and working with other people to create these amazing musical experiences. I got to travel. I did my first international travel when I was 12 years old. I spent 2 weeks in southern Italy with a choir, and we would perform everywhere. I had all of these openings in my life through this hook into music. And so as I got older, it didn't even cross my mind to think about doing anything else. It was just my thing. It was what I did. So I went to college. I got a degree in music education. I was a voice major, and I studied classical voice. And I had an amazing time over those 4 years. And I realized I didn't want to teach music. And I didn't really feel like being a performer was cut out for me and my personality, what I wanted to do in the world. Performing is an incredibly intensive career choice, and it didn't fit with me. So I was confronted with this moment of going, interesting. I just spent all of this time and this energy and resources to get this degree in music, and I know this is not what I want to do. So what do I do? And I followed the next passion, and that was pursuing this holistic change world. And I trained as a teacher of what's called the Alexander technique, which is a holistic body use method, and it focuses on increasing awareness of the way we use our physical bodies, so we can show up in the most efficient and optimal ways in the world, in whatever area we live or work. And so I pursued that. And then, of course, life changed directions, and I worked in commercial real estate. And then I did this. And then I've done a ton of different things. But the through line of my life has been, what does it mean to follow the next version of who you want to become and allow yourself to emerge, embracing everything that's happened in the past and using it to move forward? One of the most amazing things to me was how many people struggle and say, well, I don't have that skill set on my resume right now.
Yeah.
And I'll say, but you've done this. That's like that. And so for me, every time I would go into one of these interviews as a classically trained musician, they would say, do you have skills working in a corporate environment? And I would say, no, but I am no stranger to communication, nonverbal and verbal, collaboration, and assimilation to environment like this. Because that's what you have to do as a musician. You may not even know the people you're performing with, but you walk into that space, you focus on connecting in whatever ways you need to create a shared experience. And that is an incredible, unique skill set. And when I would say that to people, they would say, oh, that's pretty neat. I've actually never thought of it that way before. And guess what? It didn't matter that I had never worked in a corporate environment, because showing up with the skills that you need to do the work is really, at the end of the day, what it's all about.
And you're a better person, you're a better business person, you're better in life. And a quick example is me being a podcast host. I've become a better listener.
Yes.
412 shows. And I love what you're saying there, because that's the natural way to go is, hey, you corporate. I don't have to be a corporate. I sing. I learned all those skills that corporate learned by singing. They translate. Done. Game over.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody's listening to this, and I always love to ask this question, and they're like, I'm loving what Lisa's saying about holistic. What's the first tip you'd give them to get started?
The very first tip is to just say, ask yourself questions more than you're seeking answers. Because I think most often when people first come to me, they say, okay, I want to figure out this. I want to figure out this. How do I do this? Like, this is the goal, right? And I'll always just stop and say, why do you want to do that? And they'll say, well, that's what I should be doing, or that's the next career move for me. And I'll then help them dig further. And sometimes I'll actually say, what question do you need to ask yourself right now in order to get clearer about either what you want, what you're looking for, or who you are? And sometimes it stumps people. and they'll get a little bit, itchy, as I like to call it, right? Like you get that uncomfortable, slightly itchy feeling. And some people will just say, "Well, I don't know." And I'll say, "Perfect. Now that we don't know, we've got some place to start."
Starting point, absolutely. And you know what, Lisa, you just gave advice to everybody out there, whether they're looking for holistic or not. I know you didn't do it. Everybody should be asking questions and shutting
Mhm,
up. So I
mhm,
love, it's a powerful message because we don't ask enough questions. We talk
mhm,
too much. I do this,
mhm,
I've done this, I'm great at this, I'm awesome at this. To be honest,
mhm.
people could really care less.
And I will tell you, Steve, one of the you probably I'm sure you know this from podcasting and all of this stuff is if you struggle with asking questions or thinking of questions, because I think there's some pressure sometimes
Mhm.
to ask a good question, right? Is always lead with the curiosity, which is sort of this questioning feel and something like, tell me more or describe that for me is a beautiful bridge to not necessarily being a question, but it leads with curiosity to say, I want you to give me more to work with. I want to dig in deeper to whatever's happening here. So that can be also a very powerful thing if you're somebody who struggles with finding the right questions to ask, is to say, lead with something like, I'd love to hear more about that, or tell me more, because you would be surprised at how many people are just waiting for that invitation to really connect deeper. I think we're starved for connection in general, even though we are more connected than we have ever been. And so I think moments like that become really, really valuable. And you're no stranger to this. I don't tell you, need to tell you what happens when we open up the potential for connection. That's
Huge.
when things really start to explode.
And if you don't know it today, just look back to COVID. Just it opened
Yes.
the door for all this. So I think that's the blessing of COVID, amongst
Yes.
other things. We're running out of time here, but I was going to ask you, boy, you got me thinking about connecting in regards to, well, that's okay. When somebody, well, it was, now I remember my question. Sorry, audience, I'm a little, she's got me thinking. What you just said, audience, if you're an introvert out there, that's a game changer for you. What Lisa
Mhm.
just told you, guarantee you practice it. And the other thing I suggest is come up with 3 questions before you meet with somebody. Just write them down. How old are you? Maybe you wouldn't ask that, but what do you do for a living?
Yes.
What's your goal? What's your passion? There's so many questions. Don't AI it. Make it coming from your heart. AI is great, but don't do it there. Um, so I want to ask some personal questions.
Sure.
I get a little personal with you.
Of course.
Drum roll. Da, 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 da. So, who'd inspire you? One or two people that inspired you to get to where you are today?
That's a great question. Um, okay, one answer is sort of funny because it's not like she was a childhood idol or anything like that, but I have just Ruth Bader Ginsburg is somebody that has inspired me tremendously as I have grown into my femalehood and female adulthood. And so I want to presence her because I think she has set such a beautiful example for what it means to listen, to really take your time, think things through carefully, and take a holistic approach to what we could talk about as truth, justice, any of these
Yeah.
these other things, right? Which is really amazing. And the other person I'm going to say is my grandmother, because she was one of my favorite people growing up. And she was ahead of her time in a lot of ways. If she had been alive in this era, she would have been a crunchy influencer, right? She would have been doing she would have been trying the new things and have the tricks and tips and all of that. But she lived in a very, very different time, and did the best she could with what she had, and was constantly a source of just grounding for me. And I think to have someone in your life who provides grounding is worth more than its weight in gold, because it's so easy to get caught up in
Yeah.
life, in the world. And losing her was terribly challenging for me a number of years ago. But she remains one of the strongest influences in my life. So
She's
I'm going to
still
go
in.
with those two
It's very
women.
good. She's still there in spirit. So we're going to
Totally.
change direction a little bit.
Mhm.
So we're have a table at a restaurant, and there's
Uh-huh.
4 chairs. You occupy one of them. So you have 3 empty chairs. Dead or alive, who would sit in those chairs and why. And the last part of it is, what food would you order?
Mm. Wow, that's a
And you go
great
in any
question.
order, to just in any order you want.
Okay, well, it's an Italian restaurant just because I think family style is one of the best places to welcome in that kind of energy. And so obviously for me, there's going to be some nice red wine as well. But everyone
Nice.
else can choose whatever they're going to decide to do when it
That's
comes
great.
to drinks. But the other reason I would choose that cuisine is just because it just embodies the sense of like warmth and like richness, and that's the kind of environment I feel like I would want to set. Oh gosh, dead or alive, all of the people there. I would say, well, Oprah Winfrey I would want her at that table because she is a fascinating person and one of the best interviewers I have ever heard. I think it would be a
Amen.
fascinating
Yep.
conversation. um Brene Brown, because I have just been so personally influenced by her work, her writing, and all sorts of other things. And again, another curious mind. You're seeing a trend here, I think,
Yes. It's a good trend.
probably
Very
in
good.
in what we're moving with. Okay, okay, okay. Four chairs total. So I have one more person.
One more person.
One more person. One more person. I feel like this might be a little bit of my wild card, and I'm going to go with, this is so funny. I feel like there's a lot of pressure in choosing the last seat, right?
It does feel like that
Um,
sometimes.
it does feel like that sometimes, doesn't it? As
Who am
we're
I
sitting
leaving out? Well, remember that
like,
if they're dead,
ah,
it doesn't
don't
matter. So they
mess
would.
this up. Don't mess this up. No. You know what? I would invite Barack Obama. I think I would really be curious to hear from him about, on a more personal level, about his life and experiences. So that's
I, I
what I
tell you
would
the
go.
story. I'd love to be a fifth chair because the stories coming from those three people, oh, priceless. What a
And
great
the
table.
and the laughter. I'm sitting here actually realizing that I picked those people also because I've heard all of them laugh. And when you hear people laugh, I think you really pick up something about who they are in the world. And so I'm just like, I just had this really beautiful moment of like hearing the laughter of some really incredible, powerful thinker people. And so there we go.
Well, I want to thank you for teaching us and motivating us, inspiring us about holistic change. But now people want to get a hold of you because they heard all
Mhm.
this great stuff. How can they find you?
So my website is my name, lisadeangelis.com. And I'd love for you to just kind of check out what's there. I'm on LinkedIn. You can connect with me there as well. I did publish a book last year. You can find out more about it on my website, but we'll just shameless
Yeah, show
plug.
us that.
Embracing the unknown, exploring the pathways to change. It's really an exploration of what it means to change. And again, this whole idea of what kind of tools and resources we need to show up in the world as the next version of who we want to be so that we can make the greatest impact.
That's beautiful. Well, you're a beautiful soul. You fit the holistic
Thank
change
you.
tremendously. So thank you for being on. I want to remind everybody my TV show, Together We Serve, every Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Again, I screw up those time zones. I know I say that every time. I'm not big with time zones. Together We Serve, find it on Apple TV, Roku, Samsung, LG, all those streaming services. Imagine this big head on your 70-inch TV screen, but they're good shows, I promise. And also, to me and Lisa, want to thank you so much for listening or watching to this podcast. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Have a great day.